Ethan Carter sat at his polished mahogany desk, the Chicago skyline stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. The financial reports spread before him glowed under the soft light of his desk lamp, the numbers steady profits. Up 3% from last quarter, expansion plans on track for 2 new Sunrise Burgers locations. By all accounts, the chain of 15 fast food restaurants his father had built from a single burger joint in the 1980s was thriving. Yet, as Ethan rubbed his temples, a knot tightened in his chest. Something wasn't right. It started with the complaints. Not the usual gripes about soggy fries or slow drive-through lines, but something deeper. Customers described service as cold and unwelcoming. Online reviews on Yelp and Google echoed the sentiment. The food's fine, but the staff act like they hate being there. Ethan had dismissed it at first. Turnover was high in fast food, and 2025's economic pressures didn't help. Rent prices had skyrocketed, groceries cost a fortune, and wages hadn't kept up. People were stressed. But then the employee complaints began trickling in, not through official channels, but in whispers. An anonymous email landed in his inbox. 3 days ago, its subject line stark: "Your managers are stealing from us." The message detailed wage theft, unfair scheduling, and a toxic work environment at one of the Chicago suburban locations. Ethan's first instinct was to forward it to HR, but something stopped him. Then came the TikTok video. It had gone viral overnight, racking up 2.3 million views by the time it hit Ethan's radar. The grainy footage, filmed covertly by a customer, showed a manager at a Sunrise Burgers counter berating a young employee over a missing order. "You think this is a game? That's coming out of your pay." The manager barked as the teenager shrank behind the register. The comments were brutal. Hashtag Sunrise Burgers abuse, boycott Sunrise. This is why I don't eat there anymore. Ethan's PR team was scrambling, drafting apologies and promising a full investigation. But the damage was done. The video wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a mirror, reflecting a truth Ethan had ignored for too long. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the framed photo on his desk. His father, Michael Carter, standing outside the first Sunrise Burgers in 1984, apron smeared with grease, grinning ear to ear. Michael had come to America with nothing, pouring his life into that tiny diner. "A business is only as good as the people in it," he told Ethan countless times. "Treat them right, and they'll carry you. Treat them wrong, and you'll lose everything." Ethan had taken over 5 years ago, after his father's sudden heart attack. He'd worked tirelessly to grow the chain, modernizing operations with AI-driven inventory systems and self-service kiosks. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of the ground floor, the people flipping burgers, ringing up orders, and keeping the lights on. The anonymous email haunted him. "They cut our hours if we complain. They take our tips to cover their mistakes. Nobody listens." Ethan opened his laptop, pulling up the employee turnover stats. The suburban Chicago location had a 70% turnover rate, double the industry average. He cross-referenced it with customer satisfaction scores, the lowest in the chain. Why hadn't he noticed this sooner? He'd been too busy with board meetings, investor calls, and plans to compete with giants like Shake Shack and In-N-Out. The knot in his chest tightened. He was failing his father's legacy. Ethan's phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Claire Morgan, his regional manager. Another complaint from the suburban store. "Employee says the manager threatened to fire her for taking a sick day. Want me to handle it?" Ethan hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Claire was sharp and reliable, but sending her in would mean another report, another meeting, another bandage on a wound he didn't fully understand. He needed to see it for himself. An idea sparked, bold and reckless. What if he went undercover? Like those CEOs on reality shows, slipping into their own companies to uncover the truth. It sounded absurd. He hadn't worked a fryer since his teenage summers, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He couldn't trust filtered reports or polished site visits where managers put on a show. He needed raw, unfiltered reality. Ethan spent the next hour pacing his office, weighing the risks. If he was recognized, it could backfire spectacularly. Most employees only knew him from company-wide emails or grainy headshots in annual reports. But he couldn't take chances. He pulled up a calendar, blocking off 2 weeks. Then he called his old friend, Tony Delgado, a former Sunrise Burgers manager who'd left to open his own diner. "Tony, I need a crash course," Ethan said when his friend picked up. "How to work a fast food shift without looking like an idiot." Tony laughed, assuming it was a joke, but Ethan's tone was dead serious. "You're what? Going undercover? Like some TV stunt?" "Not a stunt," Ethan said. "I need to know what's happening in my stores. Really happening." Tony sighed. "All right, man. Come to my place tomorrow. I'll teach you the basics. But you owe me a beer." Over the next 5 days, Ethan threw himself into preparation. Tony's diner became his classroom. He learned to operate a point-of-sale system, flip burgers without burning them, and clean a fryer without setting off the fire alarm. His hands, soft from years behind a desk, blistered from scrubbing grills. He practiced keeping his head down, blending in, and biting his tongue skills he'd need to survive as a new hire. To complete the disguise, he dyed his dark hair a sandy brown, swapped his tailored suits for a thrift store hoodie and jeans, and let a scruffy beard grow out. He even bought a pair of thick-rimmed glasses he didn't need, just to throw off anyone who might squint too closely. HR created a fake employee profile for James Reed, a 35-year-old drifter with a patchy work history, and slotted him into the suburban Chicago locations roster. Ethan's final step was a late-night call to Claire. "I'm going off-grid for a couple of weeks," he told her. "Personal matter. You're in charge of operations." Claire, ever professional, didn't pry. "Everything okay, Ethan?" "It will be," he said, hoping he was right. The morning of his first shift, Ethan stood in the parking lot of the suburban Sunrise Burgers, heart pounding. The building was a squat, faded relic of the chain's early days, its neon sign flickering weakly. A dumpster overflowed in the corner, and the drive-through speaker crackled with static. Ethan adjusted his glasses, tugging his hoodie over his head. He was no longer Ethan Carter, CEO. He was James Reed, nobody special, here for a minimum wage job. He pushed open the glass door, the bell jingling above him. The smell of frying oil and bleach hit him instantly, stirring memories of his teenage summers working for his dad. But this wasn't the warm, bustling diner of his youth. The air inside was tense, heavy with unspoken frustration. 3 employees moved behind the counter, their faces tight as they juggled a breakfast rush. A tall man with thinning hair and a clipboard stood near the back, barking orders without looking up. "Hurry up with those hash browns. We're backed." "Up!" Ethan recognized the voice from the TikTok video. This was Mark Sullivan, the manager. Ethan's pulse quickened. He'd expected problems, but the reality was sharper, rawer. Mark's tone wasn't just harsh. It was cruel, laced with a smugness that made Ethan's fists clench instinctively. He forced himself to relax, keeping his expression neutral. Mark glanced at him, barely registering his presence. "You the new guy?" "Yeah," Ethan said, pitching his voice lower, rougher. "James Reed." Mark didn't look up from his clipboard. "You're on register. Don't screw it up. Sophie, show him the ropes." A young woman at the drive-through window turned, wiping sweat from her brow. She was maybe 19, with dark circles under her eyes and a ponytail slipping loose from a Sunrise Burgers cap. Sophie Bennett, Ethan noted, catching the name on her tag. She gave him a quick nod, her expression guarded but not unkind. "Come on," she said, motioning him to the register. "It's not hard, but you gotta move fast." As Ethan followed her, he caught Mark snapping at another employee, a kid who couldn't be older than 16. "Noah, you burn those patties again. You're clocking out early. Got it?" The kid Noah flinched, nodding silently. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd only been here 5 minutes, and already he could feel the weight of this place, the exhaustion, the fear, the quiet resentment. This wasn't just a poorly run store. This was a pressure cooker, and Mark Sullivan was turning up the heat. Sophie handed him a headset, her voice low. "Just do what he says, and you'll be fine. For now, anyway." Ethan met her eyes, seeing something beyond fatigue, a flicker of defiance, buried deep. He nodded, slipping on the headset. As the first customer stepped up to the counter, he braced himself. He was in deep now, and whatever he found here, he knew it wouldn't be easy to fix, but he was ready to try. Ethan Carter, now James Reed, stood behind the register at the suburban Chicago Sunrise Burgers, his fingers fumbling over the touchscreen as a line of customers snaked toward the counter. The lunch rush was relentless, orders barked through. Headsets, the sizzle of patties on the grill, and the constant ping of the drive-through timer. The air was thick with the smell of frying oil and the sharp edge of tension. Only 4 employees, including Ethan, were on duty, and the strain showed in their clipped movements and tight-lipped silence. Sophie Bennett, the young woman who'd shown him the ropes, darted between the drive-through window and the fryer, her face a mask of focus despite the dark circles under her eyes. Ethan had been here less than 3 hours, but he already felt the weight of this place pressing down on him. The store itself was a time capsule of neglect. The linoleum floor was scuffed and sticky. The ice cream machine wheezed like it was on its last legs, and a flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Ethan glanced at the schedule taped to the wall. Sophie was working a double shift, 10 a.m. to midnight, with only a 15-minute break penciled in. He didn't see one for himself or the other 2 employees, a lanky teenager named Noah and a quiet, older woman named Carla. Mark Sullivan, the manager, prowled the back, his clipboard a constant prop as he snapped orders. "Sophie, that drive-through better be under 3 minutes." Noah stopped daydreaming and cleaned the fry station. Ethan punched in an order for a double cheeseburger combo, trying to keep up with Sophie's pace. She moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, her hands a blur as she bagged orders and called out numbers. But there was something in her eyes, exhaustion, yes, but also a quiet defiance, like she was holding herself together through sheer will. Ethan wanted to talk to her, to understand her story, but the rush left no room for conversation. When the line finally thinned, Ethan wiped down the counter, stealing a glance at Sophie as she counted a handful of crumpled dollar bills from her apron pocket. She sighed, tucking them away, and Ethan seized the moment. "Long day?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Sophie glanced at him, her guard up, but softening slightly. "Long year," she said, her voice low. "You get used to it, or you don't, and you quit." She nodded toward Noah, who was scrubbing the grill. With a grimace, "He's been here 2 months. Probably won't make it to 3. Ethan raised an eyebrow, adjusting his fake glasses. "Tough job?" She let out a dry laugh. "Tough, boss." She tilted her head toward Mark, who was now berating Carla for a smudge on the drive-through window. "He's got a way of making you feel like nothing's ever good enough." Before Ethan could respond, Mark stormed over, his clipboard slapping against his thigh. "Reed, you're not here to chat. Counter's a mess, clean it properly this time." His eyes lingered on Ethan, narrow and suspicious, like he was sizing up the new guy. Ethan nodded, swallowing the urge to push back. He wasn't James Reed. Minimum wage nobody. But Ethan Carter, CEO, and every instinct screamed to call Mark out right then. Instead, he grabbed the rag and started wiping, his jaw tight on as the shift dragged on. Ethan saw the full extent of Mark's reign. It wasn't just harsh management, it was calculated cruelty. When Noah accidentally spilled a tray of fries, Mark didn't just correct him. He docked an hour from his shift, sneering, "You break it. You pay for it, kid." Carla, who'd been with the company for years, asked for a 5-minute break to call her daughter's school. Mark scoffed, "You get breaks when I say so. Keep moving." Ethan's blood boiled, but he kept his head down, scribbling notes in his mind. Wage theft, intimidation, unpaid overtime. This was worse than the anonymous email had described. Sophie, though, was the one who kept the place from falling apart. When the ice cream machine jammed again, she jury-rigged it with a butter knife and a muttered curse. When a customer complained about a missing side, she apologized smoothly, tossing in a free drink to defuse the situation. But Ethan noticed. The toll it took, her shoulders slumped when no one was looking, and her hands shook slightly as she poured coffee. She wasn't just working. She was surviving. During a brief lull, Ethan found her by the drink station, refilling the soda machine. "You've been here a year?" he asked, keeping his voice low so Mark wouldn't overhear. Sophie nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Almost. Feels like forever. How do you do it?" he pressed, genuinely curious. "Keep up with all this?" She hesitated, glancing around before answering. "No choice. It's just me and my little brother, Liam. He's 10. Our mom. She's gone. Rent's due every month, and the bills don't stop." Her voice was steady, but the weight behind it hit Ethan like a punch. He thought of the rising costs of 2025 rent in Chicago had jumped 20% in the last year alone, and groceries were a luxury for too many. Sophie wasn't just a number on a payroll. She was carrying a family on her back. "Must be hard," Ethan sighed, careful not to sound patronizing. "Liam's lucky to have you." She gave a small, tired smile, the first he'd seen. "He's a good kid. Keeps me going." But before she could say more, Mark's voice cut through the air. "Bennett, you're not paid to stand around." Mark stormed over, his face red. "And you, Reed, why's the register short by $5? He jabbed a finger at the screen, where a transaction error blinked in red. Ethan frowned, checking the log. "That wasn't me. I didn't—" "Doesn't matter," Mark snapped, snatching a $5 bill from Sophie's tip pile. "Someone's gotta cover it. Rules are rules." He smirked, pocketing the money with a casualness that made Ethan's fists clench under the counter. Sophie's face flushed, her lips parting as if to argue, but she stopped herself, her shoulders sagging. "It wasn't even my shift when that happened," she muttered, barely audible. "Life's unfair," Mark said, his tone mocking. "Get back to work." He walked away, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Ethan stared at Sophie, who was now counting her remaining tips barely. Enough for a bus pass. He wanted to say something, to promise her this wouldn't stand, but he couldn't blow his cover. Not yet. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Does he always do that? Take your tips?" Sophie's eyes flicked to him, wary but resigned. "Pretty much. If the register's off, if a customer complains, if he's in a bad mood, it comes out of our pockets. You'll see." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. This wasn't just bad management. It was theft, plain and simple. He'd seen enough in one shift to confirm the anonymous email, but he needed more patterns, proof, something to dismantle Mark's little empire without leaving room for excuses. He glanced at Mark, now hunched over his clipboard in the back office, and felt a surge of determination. This guy's days were numbered. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan kept his eyes open, cataloging every infraction. Mark cut Carla's hours mid-shift because she moved too slow. He refused Noah's request for a day off to attend a job fair, saying, "You want hours, you take what I give you." And when Sophie asked to leave early to pick up Liam from school, Mark's response was a cold, "Not my problem. Figure it out." Ethan's notes grew longer, his anger hotter, but he stayed silent, playing the part of James Reed Dot by the end of the shift. Ethan was exhausted not from the work, but from the constant tension of watching injustice unfold. Sophie lingered by the register, counting her tips again, her face unreadable. Ethan approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "This place always like this?" he asked. She exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ever since Mark took over. It used to be better people actually liked working here. Now it's just survive or quit." "Why do you stay?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Sophie's jaw tightened. "Liam, he needs me. And this job, as bad as it is, pays the bills. Barely." She slung her bag over her shoulder, heading for the door. "See you tomorrow, James. Try not to piss off Mark." Ethan watched her go, the bell jingling as the door swung shut. He turned back to the empty restaurant, the hum of the ice cream machine filling the silence. Mark emerged from the office, locking eyes with him for a moment too long. "You're still here, Reed. Don't get too comfortable." There was something in his tone, suspicion, maybe, or just disdain. Ethan gave a curt nod, grabbing his jacket dot as he stepped into the chilly Chicago evening. Ethan's mind churned. Sophie's story, Mark's cruelty, the broken equipment, the stolen wages. It was worse than he'd imagined. He pulled out his phone, drafting a quick note to Claire. "Start pulling records for the suburban store. Payroll, schedules, everything." He wasn't just here to observe anymore. He was here to fix this, and Mark Sullivan was about to learn what happened when you crossed the line. Ethan Carter, disguised as James Reed, wiped sweat from his brow as he punched in another order at the Sunrise Burgers register. Day 3 at the suburban Chicago branch felt like a lifetime. The air was thick with the greasy hum of the fryer and the relentless ping of the drive-through timer. The restaurant was a pressure cooker, and Mark Sullivan, the manager, was turning up the heat. Ethan had spent the last 2 days cataloging Mark's abuses, stolen tips, punitive hour cuts, and a deliberate cruelty that kept the staff on edge. But it was Sophie Bennett, the 19-year-old carrying the weight of her family, who kept Ethan awake at night. Her tired eyes and quiet resilience were a constant reminder of what was at stake. The morning rush had been brutal. With only 3 employees, Ethan, Sophie, and Noah handling a flood of customers. Carla had called in sick, and Mark had refused to replace her, muttering about keeping labor costs down. Ethan noticed Sophie wincing as she lifted a crate of buns, her exhaustion palpable. He wanted to ask if she was okay, but Mark's shadow loomed nearby, his clipboard ever present as he barked orders. "Bennett, move faster. You're not running a charity here." Ethan bit his tongue, focusing on the register. He'd seen enough to confirm the anonymous email's claims, but he needed more specifics, patterns, something undeniable to dismantle Mark's reign and prevent the company from brushing this under the rug. He'd been discreetly noting violations. Mark pocketing tips to cover shortages, docking pay for minor errors, and denying breaks unless begged for. The evidence was mounting, but Ethan felt the clock ticking. Mark's suspicions were growing, his sharp glances and pointed comments about new guys who asked too many questions made Ethan's skin prickle. He had to stay sharp around noon. The rush slowed, giving Ethan a moment to breathe. Sophie was at the fry station, her movements mechanical as she salted a fresh batch. Ethan leaned closer, keeping his voice low. "You ever think about reporting him?" he asked, nodding subtly toward Mark's office. Sophie's eyes flicked to him, wary but sharp. "Report to who?" "Corporate. They don't care. Last guy who complained got his hours cut to nothing. He quit a week later. She shook her head, wiping her hands on her apron. You learn to keep your head down. Ethan's chest tightened. She was right, his own detachment as CEO had let this fester. He wanted to tell her he'd fix it, that he was here to make things right, but blowing his cover now would ruin everything. Instead, he nodded. Just seems wrong, that's all. Wrong doesn't pay the rent, Sophie said, her voice flat but heavy. She turned back to the fryer, ending the conversation. The tension snapped when a customer, a middle-aged man in a trucker hat, stormed up to the counter, waving a receipt. This order's all wrong. I asked for no onions, and my burger's swimming in them. His voice carried, drawing eyes from the dining area. Ethan started to apologize. But Mark materialized, his tone deceptively calm. We'll fix it, sir. Bennett. He snapped his fingers at Sophie, who was already juggling drive-through orders. Get over here and remake this. Now. Sophie hurried over, her face tight. I wasn't on grill when that order went out, she said quietly, checking. The ticket. Mark's eyes narrowed. Doesn't matter. You're covering it. $20 for the refund comes out of your tips. He reached for the small pile of bills in her apron pocket, his fingers brushing her arm with a casual arrogance. Sophie froze, her cheeks flushing. That's not fair. I didn't. Fair? Mark cut her off, his voice low but venomous. You want fair? Find another job. Pay up or you're done here. The dining area went quiet. Customers watching, some pulling out phones to record. Ethan's blood roared in his ears. He stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. She said she didn't make the order, Mark. Why's it on her? Mark wheeled on him, his face twisting. You're pushing it, Reed. Keep your mouth shut, or you're out the door, too. He snatched the bills from Sophie's apron, pocketing them with a smirk. Sophie's hands trembled, but she said nothing, turning back to the grill to remake. The order. Ethan's fists clenched under the counter. He'd seen enough. Mark wasn't just a bad manager. He was a thief, a bully, and a liability. But before Ethan could act, Noah, the teenage grill worker, slipped past him, his phone tucked in his palm. Got it, Noah whispered, barely audible. Ethan caught a glimpse of the screen, a video recording of Mark's outburst, already uploading to TikTok with the caption, "This is how Sunrise Burgers treats us." #Sunrise Burgers abused Dot by mid-afternoon. The video had exploded. Ethan's phone, hidden in his locker, buzzed with alerts from Claire Morgan. Another viral video from your store. 3 meters views and climbing. Boards freaking out. Call me. Ethan slipped into the break room to check X and TikTok. The comments were a firestorm. Fire that manager. Boycott Sunrise. This is why fast food sucks. The hashtag Sunrise Burgers abuse was trending, and the PR team was in damage control mode, issuing vague statements about reviewing the situation. Ethan's stomach churned. This wasn't just about one store anymore. It was a reckoning for the entire company. He returned to the floor, his mind racing. He needed to act, but not impulsively. Mark's behavior was brazen, but Ethan suspected it went deeper. Maybe he was skimming more than tips. Maybe others were complicit. He needed proof to protect Sophie and the others when the hammer fell. The evening shift brought the final straw. Mark, emboldened by the lack of immediate consequences, pushed harder. He assigned Sophie an impossible task: deep clean the storage room in 20 minutes while still covering the drive-thru. When she inevitably fell behind, he stormed out of his office, his voice dripping with contempt. You're useless, Bennett. That's it, no tips for you tonight. Maybe next time you'll listen. Sophie's face crumpled, but she held her ground, her voice shaking. I did my best. You can't keep doing this. Mark laughed, cold and sharp. Watch me. He grabbed her tip jar, $12 in crumpled bills, and stuffed it in his pocket. The other employees froze, watching in silence. Noah's hand shook as he flipped burgers, and Carla kept her head down, scrubbing the counter like her life depended on it. Ethan had seen enough. The restaurant was nearly empty, the last customers trickling out. He stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice calm. "Mark, we need to talk." Mark turned, his smirk fading. "You don't get to demand anything, Reed. You're on thin ice." Ethan pulled off his glasses, letting his posture shift from slouch to commanding. The air in the room changed, the hum of the fryer fading into a heavy silence. "I'm not James Reed," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I'm Ethan Carter, CEO of Sunrise Burgers." Mark's face drained of color, his clipboard slipping slightly in his hands. Sophie's eyes widened, darting between them. Noah dropped his spatula, the clatter echoing in the stunned quiet. Carla paused mid-scrub, her mouth open. Ethan didn't blink, his gaze locked on Mark. "You've been stealing from your employees, threatening them, violating every labor law in the book. I've seen it all, and I've got proof." He pulled out his phone, showing a list of note dates, times, incidents. "You're done, Mark. Fired. Effective immediately." Mark's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out at first. Then he forced a nervous laugh. "You can't just. You think you can waltz in here and—" "I can." Ethan cut him off, his voice like steel. "And I am. Security's on. Their way. Pack your things." Mark's face twisted with rage, but he was out of moves. He muttered something under his breath, slamming his clipboard on the counter before storming to his office. Ethan turned to Sophie, who was still processing. Her arms crossed tightly. "Things are going to change," he said, softer now. "No more stolen wages. No more intimidation. I promise." Sophie's eyes searched his, a mix of hope and skepticism. "Is this for real? Or just some PR stunt to kill the TikTok mess?" Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "It's real. And I'm starting right here, right now." As security escorted Mark out, his curses echoing through the parking lot, the remaining employees exchanged uncertain glances. Sophie stood by the register, her expression unreadable. Ethan knew words weren't enough. He'd have to prove it. The viral video had forced his hand, but it had also given him a chance to make things right. He just hoped it wasn't too late. The Sunrise Burgers branch in suburban Chicago was eerily quiet after Mark Sullivan's exit, the bell above the door still swaying from his angry departure. Ethan Carter stood by the counter, his CEO facade now fully exposed, the weight of his promise to Sophie Bennett and the other employees settling heavily on his shoulders. Sophie leaned against the register, arms crossed, her expression a mix of shock and skepticism. Noah, the teenage grill worker, hovered near the fryer, his phone still clutched tightly after uploading the viral TikTok that had forced Ethan's hand. Carla, the veteran employee, lingered in the background, her eyes cautious but hopeful. The air was thick with unspoken questions. What now? Was this real change, or just a band-aid for the PR nightmare? Ethan broke the silence, his voice steady, but earnest. "I meant what I said. This store, this company, is going to be different. No more stolen wages. No more threats. You've been through hell, and I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." He met Sophie's gaze, her guarded stare challenging him to prove it. "But I need your help to make this right." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Help how? You're the boss. Just fix it." Ethan nodded, stepping closer. "You know this store better than anyone, Sophie. You've been holding it together despite Mark. I want you to be assistant manager, effective immediately." The room froze. Noah's jaw dropped, and Carla's eyes widened. Sophie blinked, her arms tightening across her chest. "Me? Manage? I'm not I don't even know how to do that. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. You're already doing it, Ethan countered, his voice firm. Every time you cover a shift, fix a problem, or keep the crew from quitting, you're leading. The title just gives you the power to make things better. He paused, softening his tone. You deserve this, and so does Liam. Sophie's throat bobbed at the mention of her 10-year-old brother, her sole reason for enduring Mark's tyranny. She glanced at Noah and Carla, as if expecting them to object, but Noah gave a small nod, and Carla offered a quiet, "You be good at it, girl." Sophie exhaled, her fingers twisting the hem of her apron. What about my hours? I need them. And what if I screw it up? Stable schedule, Ethan promised. No more last-minute cuts. And you'll have training, support, everything you need. I'm not throwing you in blind. She studied him, her skepticism lingering but cracking under the weight of possibility. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll try. But if this falls apart, I'm out. Ethan extended his hand, and she shook it, her grip firm despite the uncertainty in her eyes. The moment felt like a contract, not just a job offer, but a shared commitment to rebuild Dot by the next morning. Claire Evans, the regional manager, arrived at the branch, her no-nonsense demeanor cutting through the lingering tension like a fresh breeze. Claire, a seasoned veteran with sharp eyes and a knack for turning around struggling stores, was Ethan's ace. She carried a stack of binders and a tablet loaded with management software, ready to stabilize the chaos Mark had sown. We've got work to do, she said, setting up in the cramped office. Starting with you, Sophie. Sophie sat across from Claire, her Sunrise Burgers cap swapped for a plain hoodie, her notebook open, but her posture stiff. Ethan watched from the doorway as Claire walked her through the basics: scheduling, inventory, conflict resolution. You're not expected to know it all day one, Claire said, her voice firm but kind. But you've got instincts. Trust them. Sophie nodded, scribbling notes, but her face betrayed her doubts. What if the crew doesn't listen? They know me as one of them, not this. They'll respect you if you respect them, Claire replied. And if they don't, you call me. We'll sort it out. Ethan stepped in, sensing Sophie's unease. You've already earned their trust, Sophie. Noah and Carla, they're rooting for you. Give it time. He didn't mention the bigger challenge looming, convincing the rest of the company that these changes weren't just a reaction to the TikTok scandal. As Claire and Sophie dug into training, Ethan tackled the immediate fixes. He called in a repair crew to fix the ice cream machine and replace the flickering lights. He reviewed payroll records, confirming Mark's wage theft, over $2,000 in tips and unpaid overtime across the staff. Ethan authorized immediate reimbursements, texting Claire to ensure every cent reached the employees. But as he worked, his phone buzzed with a call from Richard Hayes, the company's CFO and a vocal skeptic of Ethan's hands-on approach. Ethan, what the hell's going on? Richard's voice was clipped. You fired a manager without consulting the board, and now you're throwing money at minimum wage workers? The TikTok mess is bad, but this is reckless. Investors are asking questions. Ethan gripped the phone, his jaw tight. Those minimum wage workers are why we're still in business, Richard. Mark was stealing from them, breaking laws. You want a bigger scandal? Let that hit the news. Richard sighed. Fine, clean up the store. But don't turn this into a crusade. We're rolling out more iKiosks. Next quarter cuts labor costs by 15%. Focus on that, not playing hero. Ethan's stomach twisted. The AI push was Richard's pet project, designed to streamline operations in a cutthroat 2025 economy. But Ethan had seen the fear in Sophie's eyes when she talked about job security. Replacing people with machines wasn't the answer. Not yet, "We'll talk AI later," he said, ending the call before Richard could argue. Back at the store, Sophie faced her own hurdles. Her first task as a system manager was to draft a new schedule, ensuring fair hours without overloading anyone. She sat with Claire, her brow furrowed as she balanced Noah's school commitments and Carla's childcare needs. "This is harder than flipping burgers," she muttered, erasing a mistake. Claire smiled faintly. "That's why it matters. You're giving them what Mark never did: respect." But respect didn't come easily. Noah, grateful for Sophie's help in the past, tested her authority, showing up late for his shift. "It's just 10 minutes, Soph," he said, shrugging. Sophie hesitated, her instinct to let it slide warring with her new role. Claire nudged her to set boundaries, and Sophie, swallowing hard, issued a verbal warning. Noah sulked but nodded, and Sophie exhaled, feeling the weight of her decision. Outside the store, Sophie's personal life pressed harder. Her landlord sent a text: "Rent's due Friday. No more extensions." With Liam's school supplies eating into her savings and a looming medical bill from her mother's old hospital stay, Sophie felt the walls closing in. Ethan overheard her on the phone, pleading for a payment plan, and approached her after her shift. "If you need help, the company can." "No," Sophie cut him off, her voice sharp but softening quickly. "I appreciate it, but I've handled this on my own for years. I'm not a charity case." Her pride stung, but Ethan respected it, backing off with a nod. As the day ended, Sophie found a note slipped under the office door, scribbled in angry block letters. "Carter's just saving face. Don't trust him. Things will go back to normal soon." It was unsigned, but the venom reminded her of Mark's parting curses. She showed it to Ethan, her jaw tight. "Is this true? Are you just here to put out the fire? Then leave us to deal with the next Mark?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "No, this isn't a stunt. But I need time to prove it, not just here, but across every store." He didn't tell her about Richard's push for eye or the board's growing impatience. He couldn't nod until he had a plan. Sophie tucked the note in her pocket, unconvinced but willing to wait. As she left to pick up Liam, Ethan stayed behind, staring at the empty restaurant. The repairs, the reimbursements, Sophie's promotion. They were a start, but not enough. Mark's shadow lingered, and the anonymous note hinted at deeper resistance. Ethan pulled out his phone, texting Claire. "Check Mark's old records. Look for anything financials, emails, contacts. This isn't over." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a reminder of how far he had to go. Change had begun, but trust was fragile, and the fight was just starting. The Sunrise Burgers branch in suburban Chicago felt different, though the change was fragile, like a newly planted seed in rocky soil. A week had passed since Ethan Carter revealed his identity and fired Mark Sullivan, and the air no longer crackled with the constant threat of punishment. The ice cream machine hummed steadily after repairs. The fluorescent lights glowed evenly, and the schedule taped to the wall now included fair breaks and stable hours. Sophie Bennett, newly promoted to assistant manager, stood behind the counter. Her Sunrise Burgers cap swapped for a crisp new name tag that read, "Asked Manager." But her arms remained crossed, her eyes scanning the crew with a mix of determination and doubt. Trust was hard-won, and she knew it. Ethan, back in his CEO role, but still visiting the store daily, watched Sophie from the dining area, his coffee cooling untouched. He'd promised change, and he delivered the first steps: reimbursed wages, fixed equipment, and a new leader in Sophie. But the anonymous note from yesterday, warning that he was just saving face, gnawed at him. Was it Mark stirring trouble, or someone else? And then there was Richard Hayes, the CFO, breathing down his neck about costs and AI kiosks. Ethan knew the real fight was just beginning. Sophie's first act as assistant manager was a team meeting, held in the break room after closing. The crew, Noah, Carla, and two new hires, Mia and Javier, sat around the wobbly table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Sophie clutched a notebook, her knuckles white. "I know things have been rough," she started, her voice steady but soft. "I'm not Mark. I want this place to work for all of us. So, tell me what you need." Noah shifted, his usual bravado muted. "More hours. I'm trying to save for a car, but Mark kept cutting me." Carla nodded, adding, "And fix the scheduling. I can't keep switching shifts last minute, my kid needs me." Mia, a shy college student, hesitated before suggesting, "Maybe a way to share tips fairly." Mark always took the lion's share. Sophie jotted down every word, her face serious. "Okay, I'm working on a new schedule with Claire. Tips will be split evenly, no exceptions. And I'm setting up a suggestion box anonymous, so you can be honest." She glanced at Noah, who'd been late last week. "But we've got to meet halfway. Show up on time, do the work. Deal?" Noah shrugged, a small grin breaking through. "Deal, boss." The word boss felt strange, but Sophie didn't flinch. Nodding firmly, Ethan, lingering outside the door, felt a spark of pride. She was finding her footing, faster than she realized. But leading wasn't easy. Noah tested her again, skipping a shift to help a friend, forcing Sophie to cover the grill during a rush. She pulled him aside, her voice firm but calm. "I get it, Noah, but you can't just bail. Next time, it's a write-up. We clear?" Noah nodded, chastened, and Sophie exhaled, feeling the weight of authority settle on her shoulders. Claire, observing, gave her a nod. "You're tougher than you look, kid." Outside work, Sophie's personal struggles loomed. Her landlord's deadline was tomorrow, and her bank account was $200 short. She'd skip meals to save for Liam's school supplies, and the medical bills from her mother's hospital stay haunted her. During a break, she sat in the alley, behind the store, scrolling through job listings on her cracked phone screen, wondering if management was worth the stress. Ethan caught her there, his expression softening. "Rough day?" "Rough life," she said, forcing a smile. "But I'll figure it out. Always do." The fragile progress shattered when Ethan's phone buzzed with an alert from the PR team. Local reporter digging into Mark Sullivan's firing. "Claims he's got evidence you acted impulsively." Ethan's stomach dropped. He opened X and saw Mark's post gaining traction. "Fired for doing my job. Sunrise Burgers is hiding bigger problems," asked their CEO. Attached was a grainy photo of payroll records, cherry-picked to suggest Ethan's reforms were bankrupting the company. Comments piled up. Hashtag Sunrise Burgers lies. Sounds like a cover-up. Ethan called Claire, who was already digging into Mark's old files. "He's not just bitter," she said, her voice tight. "I found discrepancies in the store's financials, missing tip logs, inflated labor costs." Mark was skimming, probably for years, and blaming employees to cover it. She paused. "He's also rallying ex-employees to file a lawsuit, claiming wrongful termination and executive overreach." Ethan's jaw clenched. Mark wasn't just a bad manager. He was a schemer, and now he was weaponizing the company's mistakes against it. The TikTok scandal had given him leverage, and he was using it to paint Ethan as the villain. Worse, Richard Hayes called again, his tone icy. "This lawsuit nonsense is spooking investors, Ethan. Fix it, or we're pushing the AI kiosks whether you like it or not." Ethan knew he couldn't just fire back with denials. The public was already skeptical after the viral videos. He needed to take control of the narrative. "Set up a press conference," he told the PR team. "Live stream it on X and TikTok, and I want Sophie there." The press conference was held 2 days later, streamed from the Chicago headquarters. Ethan stood at a podium, the Sunrise Burgers logo behind him, his face calm but resolute. "Sophie," stood nearby, her assistant manager pin gleaming under the lights, her nerves hidden behind a steady gaze. The room buzzed with reporters, their cameras rolling as Ethan spoke. "I failed my employees," he began, his voice raw. "I let managers like Mark Sullivan exploit good people like Sophie Bennett, who've kept our stores running despite impossible odds. That ends now. We've reimbursed stolen wages, fired abusive managers, and we're auditing every store to ensure this never happens again." He gestured to Sophie. "She's proof that leadership comes from the ground up. I'm here to listen, not just to talk." Sophie stepped forward, her heart pounding. She hadn't wanted the spotlight, but Ethan had insisted her story mattered. "I've worked at Sunrise for a year," she said, her voice clear. "It's been hard, long hours, low pay, and a manager who made us feel worthless. But I stayed for my brother, Liam. He's 10, and I'm all he's got. Ethan's changes, they're giving us a chance to do more than just survive." Her words, raw and honest, silenced the room. The stream exploded online, with hashtag #SunriseBurgersRedemption trending alongside clips of Sophie's speech. Comments flooded in. "This is what real change looks like. Sophie's a hero." Ethan watched the numbers climb, but his focus was on Sophie, who stepped off the stage, her hands shaking but her head high. Back at the store, Ethan met with Claire, who'd uncovered more evidence of Mark's theft bank statements showing he'd funneled tip money into a personal account. Ethan forwarded the findings to the authorities, and within days, Mark was under investigation, his lawsuit crumbling as ex-employees backed away, unwilling to defend a thief. The online backlash against him grew, drowning out his accusations. Sophie, meanwhile, received an unexpected email. A local nonprofit, inspired by her press conference speech, offered her a partial scholarship to study business management part-time. She stared at the message, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time in years, the future felt possible. She showed it to Ethan during a quiet moment at the store. "It's because of you," she said, her voice thick. "You didn't have to do all this." Ethan shook his head. "You did the hard part, Sophie. You showed up every day, no matter what. That's why this is working." She nodded, tucking the email away. "I'm still watching you, though. Don't let this fall apart." He smiled, a real one. "I won't." As the crew closed up, Sophie led with a quiet confidence, directing Noah to restock and Carla to check the register. The anonymous notes. Shadow lingered, but so did the hope in her eyes. Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. Richard's eye push and the board's doubts loomed, but for now, this store was healing. And that was enough to keep going. 3 months had passed since Ethan Carter shed his disguise as James Reed and turned the suburban Chicago Sunrise Burgers branch upside down. The store, once a pressure cooker of fear and neglect, now hummed with a different energy. The linoleum floors gleamed under new lights, the ice cream machine purred reliably, and the drive-through speaker no longer crackled with static. Employees moved with purpose, not panic, their chatter filling the air during lulls. Behind the counter, Sophie Bennett, now a confident assistant manager, trained a new hire, her voice steady as she explained the register system. Her Sunrise Burgers cap was gone, replaced by a simple ponytail, but her name tag-assed manager shone with quiet pride. Ethan stood in the parking lot, his breath visible in the crisp Chicago morning, watching through the glass doors. This was no longer just a store, it was proof that change could stick. Inside, the transformation was tangible. Sophie's suggestion. Box, once a hesitant experiment, overflowed with ideas. Flexible shifts for students, a staff discount on meals, even a mural for the dining area to brighten the space. She'd implemented many, earning the crew's respect. Noah, once a chronic latecomer, now arrived early, his grin infectious as he joked with Carla. Mia and Javier, the new hires, thrived under Sophie's patient guidance. Their initial shyness replaced by confidence. Customer reviews on Yelp and Google reflected the shift. Best service in years. One read. The staff actually seemed happy. Sales were up 12%, a quiet victory in the cutthroat 2025 economy, where rising costs squeezed every business. Ethan stepped inside, the bell jingling above him. Sophie glanced up, giving a quick nod before returning to her trainee. "Tap here for cash payments," she said, pointing at the screen. "And always double-check the order before you hit send." The new hire, a lanky teenager named Malik, nodded eagerly, mimicking her movements. Ethan smiled, leaning against the counter. This was Sophie's store now, and she was making it her own. Ethan's work hadn't stopped at one branch. The viral TikTok videos and Sophie's press conference speech had lit a fire under him, pushing him to overhaul Sunrise Burgers from top to bottom. He'd launched a full audit of all 15 stores, uncovering 3 more managers with patterns of wage theft and intimidation. They were fired, replaced by internal promotions people like Sophie, who knew the job and cared about their teams. Claire Evans, the regional manager, spearheaded a new training program, emphasizing respect and accountability over cost-cutting. Ethan also created a company-wide employee support fund, covering emergencies like medical bills or rent shortfalls. It wasn't cheap, but he saw it as an investment, not an expense. The biggest fight came from within. Richard Hayes, the CFO, pushed back hard, arguing that the reforms and fund would tank profits. "We need more AI kiosks, Ethan," he'd said at a board meeting, his voice sharp. "Labor costs are killing us. You're betting the company on sentimentality." Ethan held firm, presenting data. The suburban store's success showed that investing in people drove sales and loyalty. When quarterly reports showed a 5% revenue bump across the chain, even Richard grudgingly backed off, though he warned, "Don't expect miracles." Ethan didn't want miracles, just progress. He balanced modernization with humanity, installing AI kiosks in high-traffic stores, but ensuring they supplemented, not replaced, staff. He also launched a leadership pipeline, training employees like Sophie for management roles. The board, initially skeptical, began to see the vision, a company that thrived by lifting its people, not squeezing them. Sophie's transformation was the heart of the story. The scholarship from the nonprofit, sparked by her viral speech, led her enroll in business management classes at a local community college. She attended night courses twice a week, juggling work, Liam, and homework with a determination that left Ethan in awe. Liam, now settled at school with new supplies and a stable routine, beamed when he visited the store, proudly telling customers, "My sister's the boss." Sophie's landlord issues eased after Ethan quietly arranged for the employee fund. To cover her back rent anonymously, to respect her pride. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by during a quiet shift. Sophie was behind the counter, reviewing inventory on a tablet Claire had provided. She looked up, her once weary eyes now bright with purpose. "You're back," she said, a teasing edge to her voice. "Checking up on me?" "Checking up on the store," Ethan corrected, grinning. "You're making me look good, Sophie." She laughed, a rare, genuine sound. "It's weird, you know. 3 months ago, I was counting tips to buy Liam's shoes. Now I'm this." She gestured to the tablet, the crew, the store. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart." "It won't," Ethan said, his voice firm. "You're building something real here. And it's just a start." Sophie nodded, her fingers tapping the counter. "I'm thinking about applying for a manager role someday, maybe even regional, like Claire. If I can do this, I can do more." "You will," Ethan said, meaning every word. He glanced at the mural on the wall, a vibrant sunrise painted by a local artist, funded by Sophie's initiative. This place is you now, and it's better for it. The last hurdle came unexpectedly. A group of shareholders, egged on by Richard's earlier doubts, demanded a meeting to review Ethan's costly reforms. They argued for slashing the employee fund to boost dividends. Ethan faced them in the boardroom, his father's words echoing in his mind. A business is only as good as the people in it. He presented the numbers: higher sales, lower turnover, glowing reviews, but didn't stop there. This isn't just about profit, he said, his voice steady. It's about who we are. We're not just selling burgers. We're giving people like Sophie a chance to build a life. That's what my father built, and that's what I'm fighting for. The room fell silent. Claire, invited to speak, shared Sophie's story, and the suburban store's turnaround. The shareholders, moved by the data and the human cost, voted to keep the fund. Richard, though visibly annoyed, conceded defeat. Ethan left the meeting, exhausted but resolute. The vision was safe for now. Ethan returned to the suburban store one last time before heading back to headquarters. The lunch rush was in full swing, but Sophie handled it with ease, directing the crew like a conductor. She caught his eye, giving a small nod before turning back to Malik, who was mastering the register. Ethan lingered, watching the team work. Together, their laughter mingling with the sizzle of the grill. This was what his father had dreamed of, a place where people mattered. As he stepped outside, Ethan felt a weight lift. There was more to do, more stores to audit, more leaders like Sophie to nurture, but this store, this moment, was proof. It was possible. He thought of Sophie's journey, from surviving to thriving, and knew it was worth every fight. This story is more than a tale of corporate reform. It's a testament to the power of empathy and accountability. Ethan Carter's journey from detached CEO to hands-on leader shows that change starts with listening, not dictating. Sophie Bennett's resilience, carrying her brother through hardship while rising to lead, reminds us that strength often hides in the quietest places. Their story reflects a universal truth. Businesses thrive when they value people over profit, and leadership is earned through action, not titles. The lessons are clear. For leaders, it's a call to look beyond spreadsheets and see the human cost of decisions. For workers, it's a reminder that your voice matters, even when it feels unheard. And for all of us, it's proof that small changes, fair wages, respect, opportunity can ripple outward, transforming lives and communities. Want more stories of courage, change, and human connection? Subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube, where we share tales that inspire and uplift. Join our community and never miss a story that reminds us what it means to be human.